EPCM was in September. Seems like so long. Seems like in some
And
ways.
this is mostly, you're giving guys an
Yeah, I'm-
update on the feedback on it.
It's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Early childcare development.
Look at those two children, they're having a good time, they're running out there. He said maybe a later date, Sean.
I know that side.
It's Maggie out there.
Allison, is that you out there? Yeah, thank you.
Astonishing.
All right, we'll call this meeting to order, the committee of the whole. Thank you all for coming, members of the public, and we're very gifted today to have our MLA here, Jordan Sturdy, and his trusty sidekick, Sharon Thompson, who also has been elected to the West Van Council, which we congratulate. Now, there's not much of an agenda here. We thought it would be more of just an open back and forth. We will leave public comments till sort of towards the end, if you don't mind. Thank you. So we have the approval of the agenda. Thank you. Did you?
Did you want to add public comments at the end? 'Cause right now, there's nothing on there that says that the public can speak, so it just might make it clear for everybody that there was that
I was just
opportunity.
gonna open it up at the end if we got some
Depending
time.
on the time, I think.
Yeah, depending on the time. too.
Okay, well, I'd like to add public comments as number 4.
Perfect. Let's put on
Okay.
there number 4, public comments.
Just
You
to
mean
be.
after adjournment?
That's at the pub.
Yeah.
Yeah, because don't forget during this
So
one,
we'll
yeah,
change that
the
to
general
3.
public in the pub afterwards.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Just for the people that are here. So can I have approval of the agenda, please? Thank you. First, second, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, council update to MLA Jordan Sturdy, West Vancouver, Sea to Sky. The first one on the agenda is the major capital projects.
You didn't mind let Jordan say anything at the beginning?
No, he's just gonna sort of key in as required.
If I might,
Yeah.
just to say, I'd like to congratulate everybody. It was a very interesting election. Don't tell me that every vote doesn't count.
Oh, yeah, don't tell me.
I'm sure that has been said before. I was not a unique comment, I'm positive, but I think it looks like you have a great group, and I have been traveling around to meet with all of the new councils in my region, just to get a sense of what as council begins to develop a vision for themselves and for each new council, what you'd like to try and accomplish over the next couple of years, and what I can do on your behalf to help you further your ambitions. And really, that's why I'm here more than anything else. I'll certainly provide feedback, provide comment, provide advice where I can, but ultimately, I'm really more interested in hearing what you want me to try and accomplish. So I look forward to this, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you, Jordan. And further to that, I think we have our phase 2 of our strat plan coming up at the end of the week, and that's going to sort of formalize where our plans are for the next, year and beyond, 4 years. But I think what we'll do is we'll just go through these different areas here, and after each section, maybe you can just comment on them, or we'll just ask you, if we're going in the right direction, or if for any clarification we might need. So the first one on the major capital projects, and these are residual for the last council, obviously, especially the community center now. The community center has been rolling along. We're in the fundraising stage, as everybody knows. I haven't got a big presentation on. Do you want to speak to it, Shauna? You don't have to.
Okay. I could, a little, if you'd like.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
I think first of all is introducing Shauna to Jordan.
Oh,
You guys had a long
you guys
phone
know.
call, I understand,
Oh,
and
good.
Shauna was very appreciative of the time you took to talk.
Shauna
about the
Jennings, huh?
project.
So
Chair of the
the community center project is, as Gary said, in fundraising stages. We have a 85% working drawings and a building permit in hand for the facility. We are submitting a grant application, as we discussed, for January 23rd, 2019, and will be for the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Grant. Do you have any specific questions about the, I know we chatted about it.
Yeah, sort of the overall cost, the overall budget, what it looks like,
The
and
overall-
the ask,
The overall budget is 14.5 million, and the overall ask from the grant will be 7.3 million.
Yeah, of course, it comes out of the infrastructure,
Yeah.
program. Any
Yeah,
comments on
and
that?
this is the federal program that the province is administering, right?
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And my recollection was that it was it 120 million for British Columbia?
I think it was 134 million, yeah,
Yeah.
for British Columbia.
Yeah, and that's what I think we talked about, that was my only concern, just with regard to the application and the ask, and seeing whether there was ways of, there's a risk of not asking for enough, but there's also a risk of asking for too much. And, recognizing that we have sub 200 municipalities in British Columbia, give or take, all of them are gonna put in a request. And if everybody asks for 7.3 million, we're way oversubscribed, so just, I know in the Steve Sky, I'm anticipating that there'll be an application from Squamish.
Okay.
And I know that Lions Bay has some aspirations as well. I think Whistler and Pemberton are certainly from a rec side anyway, are not likely to put forward something that I'm aware of anyway. So that's sort of the competition here in the region.
Squamish is looking for the rec community.
Yeah, they have a very, very old infrastructure and a significant population. They've got a pool and a rink that are both on their last legs.
Right.
It's fair to say, they really don't have a community center either.
Yeah, kind of, that's.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I know.
get it. Yeah, so that would just be my only caveat, its only concern is that, and that's always a tricky one to figure out what's the right number.
Right, in terms of asking.
Yeah.
And Lions Bay, what do you think that?
Well, I don't, I'm not really at liberty to sort of share the whole meeting, but I had a discussion or meeting with Lions Bay yesterday, and they have a very, very significant infrastructure deficit. So it's not necessarily recreation,
Okay,
although there is some recreation component to it,
yeah,
but just overall, there's a significant infrastructure deficit. So this fund will be, it's not, my recollection was it's not just for recreation.
this stream,
Yeah.
my understanding is the stream is culture, recreation, and community
And yeah,
infrastructure.
that's a pretty broad
Yeah.
envelope.
Don't think it goes to water and sewer, those are the other
No.
streams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll just continue our fundraising on that.
Well,
and we'll see how it goes.
absolutely.
The timeline, we're finding that the timeline was extremely short, for the kind of money that we're.
Which is great that you're
raising.
at the place you are right now, in
Yeah.
terms of having your plans, having something that you can provide in terms of an application, so that'll provide an advantage in some respects.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the other question that keeps coming up is, are they thinking about dishing out the whole fund in this first round?
It's not that much money, so I'd be surprised if it all didn't go out.
Okay.
And I think it's also worth noting that we really haven't had, my recollection anyway, we haven't had an infrastructure intake for recreation specifically in an awfully long time.
Yeah.
In fact, I think in Pemberton, we received some money for our community center. I think we got $1.1 million back in 2008, so 10 years ago, which I think was
Yeah,
probably
that's the last one.
about the last call, so there'll be quite a bit of pent up demand.
Yeah, and probably not see another one for this size for a while.
Well, we'll see what,
Yeah,
I think
no,
often the applications are informative, so,
Yeah.
you get a $1 billion worth of applications, and it tells
Yeah.
you that
There's a need, each need of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there used to be a stream and a gas tax fund that Pemberton got that we couldn't apply for because we were in. And I think a lot of communities applied for that, which isn't there anymore.
I'm not sure which one was that.
Oh, I think it's a strategic priorities fund.
Mm.
Now they just got the community works fund or one or the other.
Right.
But,
Anyway, I think we're gonna have to be ready for this on January 23rd. It doesn't look like they're gonna push that back at all, and we'll just let that, oh, sorry.
Would you like to see a copy of the application when it's ready to go.
Oh,
Yeah, it's always great if if our office gets CC'd on your applications, and then we can follow them through the process and ask about them. If we don't know the application's there, it's pretty hard to,
No, absolutely.
support it.
Excellent.
And,
I believe that was the intent.
yeah,
To go for
and I would say that's generally true, whether it be an application, like a grant application, or some other initiative that you want to try and advance for the community. Let your MLA know.
Yeah, the next one is the Cope Bay Water Treatment Plant, which is a long time coming. We've just sort of finalized the huge subdivision project out there by Grafton Lake, and part of that approval was that we got land for this sewer plant. We've done a test on this, sorry, the water plant, and we've done a test on the ceramic filters and that sort of thing, so we're gonna be going ahead with that. But that again is another huge capital project that we have funding for, some funding.
Yes.
Yeah, to a certain extent. And the other big capital project, of course, the Fire Hall and Emergency Operations Center, which,
If you might,
Yeah.
in terms of the water treatment plant,
Yes.
what's the capital cost on that?
it's about 10, isn't it?
6.8.
Oh, is it?
6.8.
6.8.
Oh, is it?
6.8.
Trust the finance guy.
Yeah, sorry.
I know where they are.
Yeah.
So it's one third,
In terms of-
2/3 through grants.
Yeah.
Provincial and federal, and 1/3 by the municipal.
1/3, 2/3, okay.
Yeah, it's the old program.
And we hope to be up and running summer 2020.
Which will be very nice for all the people who have water. It's been long overdue. The Fire Hall and Emergency Operations Center, and that's, we have the land for that, we have
Completed design drawings, we have a referendum approving a $3 million borrowing.
yeah,
We've gotten some monies from Emergency Management BC through some of their grants for some of the
EOC stuff.
EOC stuff, tables and chairs and things that we can use, for the functioning of it.
So did that borrowing go to referendum, or was
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
Yeah. It was alternative approval,
No,
or the
we
way it
decided
went with the election?
No?
No,
we did
separate,
it
separate.
before, yeah. We had a few little procedural hiccups, losing the CFO and having to find a new one and getting the architect on board and things like that. So we're a little behind in that
So
part.
land is there, and design is complete?
Yeah, that's-
Design, just preliminary design. so,
Wow. it's pretty
There's a-
complete.
It's preliminary.
Oh,
Got it all.
you can always trust Allison.
She can find it, it's there.
Or the reverse.
Trying to find the steps that these are all individual groups. Medical clinic would go right there.
Yeah.
We'd be able to drive the ambulance through to get into the ambulance bay, medical clinic there. Couple days, office admin, emergency training, emergency
EOC,
operations
yeah.
training,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's coming to council at the next council meeting, and to sort of move that ahead to the next
Working
step.
drawings.
Yeah, get some working drawings out of that.
Okay.
So those are our major capital expenses.
So that's fully funded then?
Well,
Hope
yes,
so.
yeah, we sure hope so.
You never know until you go to tender.
Right, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, we've got a good contingency.
Crown lands and logging. David, do you want to say anything about
Sure.
that part of the
Sure,
show?
yeah, a couple of things. So, first of all, you're familiar, of course, about a year and a half ago, there was a proposal of these timber sales to log a considerable portion of our crown lands. The group on the island got pretty concerned about that. And,
Well, the whole island did.
well, yeah, the whole island,
Absolutely.
council was unanimous, there was clear opposition, and so they pulled back their idea. But they're still concerned that, this could come back, and so there've been a few initiatives to try to prevent this from coming back. And one was the group, Defend Island Forest, produced that 30-odd page document, which we gave to you a year or so ago, and you, I know, presented to the House, which was great. But there's still some other, but we still haven't, got anywhere where we need to go. We've also approached Metro Vancouver to see if they're interested in acquiring the land as an expansion of Clifton Park. And one of the things that I was looking at and I wanted to ask you about is the process called the Crown Land and Nominal Rent 10-year sponsorship to transfer Crown lands to municipalities. Yeah. And I looked through the application form. It looked pretty straightforward for the kinds of things that, you know, the analysis that we could provide to support that. But any thoughts about that process? You have to get sponsorship from somebody. I presume that will be
Ministry.
yeah, from a minister. I presume that would be parks if we're looking at transferring the land into park. And Maureen's going to add to that.
Maybe I could just speak to that. It's Flynn Road that
It would be at
is
Flynn Road,
dealing
would
with the
that be?
policy issues.
My understanding was the application would go to Flynn Road.
The person in Flynn Road who would deal with this initially is Duncan Williams. And he got in touch with us in part in response to the meeting that we had with Minister Donaldson during UBCM. So Mr. Williams was given the job of following up, and he would be the person that would provide us with some guidance. The caution that he gave to me and to Sue Ellen was that generally what he's dealing with is something that would be on a much smaller scale than what we were thinking about as far as the Crown lands were concerned. The other reason that this is on the agenda is that you had expressed interest at UBCM and possibly having some sort of public event on Bowen to talk about the future of the Crown lands. And I was curious about whether that was something that you might still be interested in pursuing.
With regard to Crown, the nominal rent 10 years, yes, generally speaking, Flynn Road would manage those tenures and would process them. I think you're right that there does require a sponsor from some entity. But I don't know a lot about these other than they generally, as Councillor Nicholson mentioned, are around things like if you want to put a water treatment plant or
An infrastructure issue.
yeah, and then that becomes
That's what we
available.
did for Mannion Bank.
Yeah. So whether this would be applicable for the Crown land on Bowen overall, it's worth investigating. It's hard to say whether that would be something that the government would support or not, but I'm certainly willing to look into that and see what kind of willingness there is to consider it. I would like to just make sure that we are clear that that it was actually, it wasn't an intention to log 23% of Bowen Island. It was to create a forest stewardship plan. And a forest stewardship plan can be a lot of different things. And so I have to admit, I was concerned originally by some of the presentation of what was proposed or considered. I saw the maps that showed, well, it's the same sort of deal we look at on Gambier, where it's like they're gonna clear cut 2/3 of Gambier.
Yeah.
That was never anybody's intention.
So the numbers, if I remember correctly, were 8,000 cubic meters.
No, because that was potential, I suppose there was that potential, but at the end of the day, you don't know, you can't come up with that number until you have a forest stewardship plan. And so, when I looked at the Crown land on Bowen Island, and then I looked at the constraints on that Crown land, so you might have had 23% or something like that was Crown. And then the constraints on that are things like watersheds, on drainages, on certain wildlife habitat, on old growth polygons, and on visual quality assessments. All of that comes off of that 23%. And so, and then from whatever's left over, and it might be very little, I don't know, you don't know until you really run through the process. Then of that, generally speaking, it's a 80-year cycle. So you take the total or the total amount of growth each year and harvest a percentage that equates to a sustainable harvest over an 8-year period. So, and I'm not saying I'm not necessarily advocating for that approach. I'm just saying that's how these forest stewardship plans work. And I don't like, I'm uncomfortable when people suggest that it would be, they come in here, clear cut 23% of Bowen Island and leave. Because I don't think that was ever anybody's intention. And I think there's ways to look at a forest stewardship plan that can provide value as well. So I don't really have a significant opposition to developing a forest stewardship plan, because that plan could mean no cutting at all. That plan could mean dealing with wildfire. That plan could mean, could mean commercial logging. It could mean a variety of things, but you never really know until you go through the plan. Now that said, there was clearly opposition to any harvesting on Bowen Island. I even at one point proposed that, I thought, well, Bowen does consume some wood on an annual basis. It would be kind of interesting to look at Bowen and say, what do we consume on the island on an annual basis in terms of construction and in terms of heating and whatever other uses there are for wood. And saying, if we truly want to be a sustainable community, should we think about harvesting what we need on the island? It's the kind of thing you want to, I think, you want to really consider some of these things. Now, again, that suggestion was not particularly well received. Yet Bowen and the Crown Land on Bowen remains within the annual allowable cut and the annual allowable cut calculation for this region. And the concern or the problem I have is that if it's not cut here and there is a mandate by Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development to harvest the AAC,
The allowable annual cut.
the annual allowable cut, and they're nowhere near harvesting the AAC on the coast, from what I understand. But nonetheless, in certain subregions, if the managers are going to get to their targets, they have to harvest somewhere. And that means that if we're going to leave Bowen's AAC within that region, then it's not going to be harvested here, then it's going to be harvested somewhere else. And that just really transfers the issue to somebody else. And so I don't think that's equitable, and that's why I supported the idea that if we're never going to harvest on Bowen, then take it out, because it's not fair to just transfer that obligation to somebody else.
I very much appreciate that was the position that you took, and I would certainly be supportive. I mean, our general sense from the people we talked to at the time and discussions later is that Bowen serves an important role in the region as, it was part of the green zone as it used to be described.
Right.
And it's really an important role to protect a significant portion of Metro Vancouver, of our region, for people to protect nature and for people to experience nature. Crippen Park has a valuable role in doing that, and a lot of the people who come into Crippen Park head right up Mount Gardner anyway. And so it's sort of natural to keep that as part of the system for the region. Anyway, that's a position that we've taken. Certainly, we've approached Metro Vancouver about that, and we'll see how it goes. But we'd like to do what we can to help move that forward.
Do you know if my understanding is they've done a timber cruise, but do you know if they have or have seen it?
Sorry, I've seen what?
A cruise? Give
You
me
mean
an
the-
idea
you
what's
mean
up there.
Oh,
Timber
The
cruise.
data?
A timber cruise, what's the value, what kind of timber's up there and the value of it?
not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
And do they take practicality into it at all? I mean, I don't think it's the best place to log. I don't think they're very efficient.
Well, I think you'd have to look at the quality of the
The market.
wood, fiber,
and-
and the market and other things, yeah, yeah. So I think the next steps, we did, I've talked to Minister Donaldson on numerous occasions about this, including, the meetings we had with staff at UBCM, and, I've talked to him in the House on a number of occasions about this exact issue. He is aware of it, and we have, I asked him some specific questions about mechanisms to pull Bowen out of the AAC, and I have not at this point received any response with regard to the practicality of any one of those particular initiatives, but he took it under advisement, and I think his concern would likely be that if we do this on Bowen, what does this mean otherwise? You know, what other community is, who's next? Yeah, that issue of precedence,
Yeah.
yes.
Sorry, Sal, go
I
ahead.
have a question about, with all the wildfires in the, and just forestry generally, with all the wildfires in the past few years and the concerns about forest practices, isn't there some kind of, maybe you could advise us, is there some kind of review of forest practices or some kind, aren't they contemplating some changes to the way forestry is managed province-wide? I thought there was something going on.
There's a couple of initiatives. One would be the professional reliance review
Yeah.
and the updates to the legislation that took place in the fall.
Yeah.
The regulations have not been produced at this particular time, so.
Yeah, no, that's not what I was thinking about. I thought it was,
That's one
Forest
aspect of it.
Stewardship Council? Yeah, I don't know.
And then there is certainly a desire to ensure maximum utilization of fiber out of the forest land base. So I think that really means trying to maximize the fiber utilization, is exactly what it says. So leaving less waste in the forest is one of the primary considerations.
Okay, I think that's the one I was confused about, is I didn't understand what it meant. Use maximum fiber sounds like, let's go cut everything.
Yes.
I just
Nice
wanted to
way
be
to say
clear
that.
on what
Clear.
what it was for.
I think what they're looking for is, at this point, up until now, perhaps tops under 6 inches would be left out there and burned. Is that the best use of that fiber? Could that fiber be used for pulping? Could that fiber be used for biochar? Could that fiber be used for other uses in the long run? And so you have a better, perhaps you have a better way of recapturing that carbon or resequestering it. And are there other value-added products that you can generate out of that same fiber? Because otherwise you're just simply piling it and burning it or
Right,
piling it.
and the slash, and it dries up over the years.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what I'm thinking about is the wildfire-related things to do with, would they continue requiring that alder be sprayed with herbicides, for
Glyphosate,
example, and other kinds of things that might be natural wildfire breaks. And I just thought they were looking at more of those different changes. And I thought there was a public comment period or something, but if it's okay, I can look it up. Yeah.
And the glyphosate application, we did look into that in our office, and the understanding is that is really not something that's utilized in the south at all. It's, for the most part, it's used up north. And there's a review of those processes, because some of this data is new. Some of the ideas around the wildfire breaks as a result of deciduous forest is something that hadn't been considered because it wasn't a species that was desirable from a forest sector
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, no, that's
So,
fine.
but there's other
That's
values
helpful.
there that sometimes get missed, and I think it's a review of that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any, Maureen?
Just this Friday, Councillor Morris and I are participating in a webinar that Glenrose hosting, and they titled it The Fraser Valley and Sea to Sky Corridor Coastal Forest Sector Overview, Communities' Interests and Opportunities Ahead. So they're getting the ball rolling with giving new councils an introduction to what forestry is all about, what that ministry is all about, and then a chance for us to say something about the role of forestry or not in our particular communities. So I think that might be quite helpful.
Mhm. And I'm sorry, Maureen, I didn't answer the other part of your question.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly more than happy to enter into a public dialogue or process around what the future of the Crown lands on Bowen will look like.
So
And,
how would we get to there? How would
well,
we-
I think that's something that we should talk about. I
Yeah.
think that it's something that we should work on together
Yeah.
as a community, as a council, and as your provincial representative. So I think with our office, we can be.
Yep.
Or if you have some ideas about how that, you might want to see that work and the timing on it, then absolutely, happy to enter into that discussion.
I think one of the biggest things, which I remember when we were talking about, when we were redoing, initially incorporated about trying to acquire it or get the tenure, for example, is once you've got the tenure, you're responsible for looking after it.
Correct.
And the water buffer is kind of expensive.
Well, as long as it's in the timber harvesting land base, I think that the Forest Lands and Natural Resource Operation still
But
has
if we had a crown
wildfire.
tenure on it, it would
Potentially,
be in
that
the,
would be one of the implications you need to
Yeah.
understand.
yeah, exactly, it's just
Whose
what's going
responsibility
on,
is it?
cost and responsibility.
Yeah, and certainly wildfire branch would respond, but you might get billed.
Bill, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, from a fire perspective, I mean, you look at it, and if we were gonna do anything for a fire cutting, I just don't think it's efficient on the island. There's just too much timber here. And we can do what we can around our houses and that sort of thing, but as far as fire breaks and cleaning the forest, I don't think it's gonna work. That would be my thought anyway, it's just
Well,
a massive undertaking.
True, although Whistler is undertaking
They are,
a
yeah.
very similar process,
Yeah.
and Squamish is looking at protecting some of their neighborhoods as well, so, and that doesn't.
So this is in the urban interface, not so
Yes.
much, oh, okay,
Yeah.
it's not in the wild.
No.
Yeah.
No, okay, that's, yeah, no, that's a different thing
Yeah,
altogether.
yeah.
Part of the fire smart operation, eh?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's very expensive also.
No, and that's one of the things that can be incorporated into a port stewardship plan.
I have a related question, it's not on our agenda here, but it relates to the Water Act, our new Sustainable Water Act. And in there, I think that there's an opportunity for communities that are concerned about changes in water, especially with climate change and whether we have enough water with longer, drier summers, making some kind of water stewardship plan. And my question is, has any other community made a water stewardship plan under the new act yet? And also, would that be something that would be taken into consideration when logging is being proposed or planned, or in a forest stewardship, or whatever that's called, forest stewardship plan?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the constraints when you look at the timber harvesting land base is water sources, water drainages, aquifers.
Yeah, yeah, I knew that watersheds, water drainages were a constraint, but I'm specifically asking about this watershed stewardship plan that I understand is something that you can do under the new Water Sustainability Act.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if you know of anybody who's done one yet?
No.
Because it's all new.
Yeah, no, I don't. Although when you, every time a aquifer is accessed to create a municipal water source, then the Ministry of the Environment does require that that aquifer is assessed and understood. So how does it recharge? Where does the water come from? What's the future look like?
So registered too.
Yeah, I registered, exactly.
Well, wells have to be registered.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And so, and that's extending to other users, but not private users.
Yeah,
So there's 60,000 wells, I believe, in British Columbia that will not need to register because they are residential in nature.
yeah.
The rest of them, so that's commercial, industrial, institutional, including agriculture.
And bed and breakfasts.
I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
if it's a business, if it's commercial, then it requires that there be
Yeah.
a registration and an understanding. And the reason for that is so you can really begin to better understand that whole aquifer in its entirety. Now, there's been some a lack of uptake to some degree for registration.
Yeah.
I think they're way quite behind in terms of getting people to register.
Yeah, I
They
understand
extended
there's
it.
a deadline.
Which has been extended, but it's still looming. I think
Yeah.
it's this fall, I think.
Okay.
I would.
Okay, I had
quote me on
March,
that.
March date. That's not March?
I'm not sure.
Okay,
but
well, we
we'll,
can check. Yeah,
registration date, we'll find that
okay.
out.
It's a mammoth project.
Yes.
To get out there.
Now, interestingly, it hasn't progressed to the point where we're at a place that the higher level objectives have been able to be achieved. And part of that is ultimately generating some revenue so we can understand drainages overall. Because yes, a lot of people can register that they're, pulling water here, pulling water there, but we need to understand what's happening in the whole as a cumulative effect on a drainage. And that requires funding, and it requires some significant assessments and some technical work.
Well,
And so, but at this point, from what I can see, it looks like it's really just cost recovery in terms of the registration fees
Yeah.
to cover the cost of actually administering
Yeah.
the registrations and that sort of thing. So there isn't at this point a fund
no, I wasn't really
available.
asking about funding. I just think as an island, we're basically a bubble of fresh
Susceptible,
water
yeah.
with what comes down from the sky and seeps into the cracks and everything, right?
Mhm.
And that's all we've got, is what falls in the winter. And with summers getting longer and drier, and people are starting to feel summer drought. And I'm just wondering if logging and the potential impacts of logging, as you said, over 80 years, whether that, I'm thinking that maybe we as an island need to make a water stewardship plan under the new water stewardship plan, I think is what it's called, anyway, under the new Water Act. Because
It's
we
the Water Sustainability
don't,
Act.
that's it, thank you. Because we don't have a way to pipe water in, fresh water in from anywhere else, right? We can't just go back further into the mountains.
No, but
And and the effects of logging over 80 years, I don't know if anybody can project that, and let alone new wells that might be coming on as people populate some of our undeveloped land over 80 years. And what, I'm just wondering if, that's why I'm asking the question. I know the Water Stewardship Act is new, and that this idea of a water stewardship plan is new, but something holistic that we could do for Bowen Island, because we have many little watersheds, right? They're steep, they're small, and the proposed logging up at the top of them could affect many of them. And,
Well, I think that's really a consideration, absolutely. I just remind you that with regard to the logging, you would, or to forestry, you would look at the biomass in a particular region, and then you would harvest what grows on an annual basis. So that would be the principle, so that overall, the biomass wouldn't change. The actual trees would change, but the total volume wouldn't. So ideally, it shouldn't affect that sort of thing, but that's again an assessment that is worthy of consideration and further investigation. But I'd also suggest that a place, there's many communities around British Columbia that don't really have the opportunity to go off into some other drainage somewhere. In fact, one could argue that a water line to West Vancouver is
Would look pretty good at
easier
one point.
than it is to, if you're living in the Okanagan, where you've got a very dry aquifer at the best of times, these are probably the drainages that have some of the more significant risk, and really do require a good plan going forward, especially with growth. And I think you rightly point out that growth can create additional demand. So all to say that, I recognize Bowen is unique, I recognize islands are unique, but they're not entirely as unique
I think
No,
they are.
no, and I'm not trying to lobby you here, I'm asking, because it's all sort of new, and we
Yeah.
haven't got examples of other communities that have
No.
done these, and I
I think
have been going to the Okanagan and to different water, seminars and things like that, and they've got big challenges coming with climate change.
Yeah.
And I'm going, we are also gonna, it's
lack
climate
of
change, what can
snowpack
we learn
and-
from that?
yeah.
Yes, so their changes are coming, and they're not just, lack of water, it's also increased, sediment in the water because the storms are bigger in the winter, and that, there's all kinds of different changes as well that could affect, the quality of our water, and our ability of our new
Yeah.
water treatment plant to handle it, all that kind of thing. So, what I don't want is to, not pay attention to something now that 20 years from now could be affecting our water or our, wildfire risk and all those things. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure that they're being captured now in a forest sustainability plan, which seems to be all about, fiber and that kind of thing.
Well, I think
Maximizing
that's
harvest,
certainly
yeah.
worth,
Yeah.
I think it's a very valid observation around the forest sector.
Yeah, okay.
And the Water Sustainability Act, just to review it a little bit, I think it was introduced in 2015, I want to say, and it's been somewhat slower, 2014, it's been rolling out over the last number of years. There's been some challenges around the administration and the willingness of people to register. So it is rolling out more slowly than one would hope, but the deadlines are there. And
Okay.
it's a critical piece
Yeah.
going forward, understanding where our water's coming from. There's no
Yeah.
question about that. I mean, without water, there isn't.
Just for other members of council, through the Islands Trust, we, speaking as an Islands trustee now, we have a freshwater specialist that is on contract for a couple of years, starting to work with some of the islands that are in more risk of running out of water than Bowen is,
Yeah.
in drier ecosystems.
yeah, very
And
pervious
so we're
soil.
learning, well, various issues,
Yeah.
yeah. And so we're looking at different, some of them don't have lakes, for example.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at different ways of thinking about water sustainability on islands. And we do have some, anyway, so that's where some of these questions are coming from. Okay, I'm happy to move on if people want.
We don't have water, we're not living here.
No,
Is that subterranean also, or is it just surface water?
no, both.
Both
No,
things?
no, there's different rules for groundwater versus surface water, but they're all licensed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
sediment issue would be more of a surface water issue than a groundwater, because it would get filtered as a.
Yeah.
And there's a whole section which I just sent everybody from the provincial website on water planning and strategies.
Okay. Okay, moving on,
Did
rural.
it have a date there? An application date?
Oh, when the act came in?